Hey, how's it going, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to The Real for Real. If this is your very first time checking us out, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. And if you've been watching us this entire time, of course, we appreciate your continued support. Thanks for supporting a little channel like us. So today I'm going to be talking about the film Dark City. This movie was written and directed by Alex Proyas, and it came out in 1998. Now, if you're not familiar with who Alex Proyas is, you've probably at least heard of his film The Crow starring Brandon Lee. So that's another project that Alex Proyas worked on. So, this movie came out in 1998 and The Matrix came out in 1999. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that is because a lot of people who are die-hard Dark City fans, they will tell you that they think that the Wachowskis completely took Dark City's idea and created the first Matrix. If they don't say that, then they'll probably say that Dark City has just clearly influenced the Matrix in some kind of way. Now, the side of the fence that I'm on, I do think that Dark City has influenced the Matrix in some kind of way, just based on some of the same set pieces and set designs that you'll see in the movie. I think there's also some similarities, just overall storyline, like with our main protagonist, we'll be able to see different similarities and kind of overall themes as well. And that's what I'm going to kind of talk about. But I'm also going to talk about what this movie means for me and kind of, how I came about this movie. So remember, I said this movie came out in 1998, so I would have been 8 years old at the time. And I'm going to take it all the way back to my Blockbuster days. I remember seeing this movie on the shelf and nobody ever renting it, but me always just looking at it being like, wow, I like the way the cover of this movie looks. I'm very interested to watch it. But I was like, I'm 8, 9 years old. I'm like, I don't know any of my friends talking about this movie. Matrix is the movie that's popping. Armageddon was out at the time. Everybody liked Armageddon. Enemy of the State was out. The Wedding Singer. Like, these were a lot of movies that were out around that time. And so I just never heard anybody talking about Dark City. So I was like, you know what? I'm not going to rent it. Because why? Because I'm 8, 9 years old. We're all influenced by our friends at that age, and just nobody in my age range was talking about it. I didn't even have family that was talking about it. So I'm like, why would I rent this movie? And so the way I came about this movie was it took me into my adult years to finally just find this movie, and I decided, let me buy it on Blu-ray. And I watched it and I was blown away. I was like, wow, like the special effects of this movie, the storyline, the acting, I thought all of it was good. And the way it was very tightly paced for me. And I was like, the movie's not long. And it's one of those movies where you have to pay attention to every single detail. Otherwise, if you're like, if you're doing something on your laptop, or if you're texting, talking on the phone to people and trying to watch a movie, like, you're not going to be able to follow it that way because the movie moves fast and like you need every little detail. And so I like the fact that the movie is paced that way, but I also like the fact that this movie has a conclusion, because sometimes these kind of movies, they always build up sequels, right? The Matrix is an example. The Matrix had, to me, the first one had a great ending and could have been a standalone, but they continued to make sequels. And so Dark City, I like the fact that they never made sequels. It's its own movie and it's great. And I also like the fact that Dark City, there's no films out there to really compare it to besides The Matrix, but there's nothing to compare it to beforehand. Like, there's no movies that came out before Dark City that you could be like, oh, Dark City got that from this. The only thing that anybody could say, I know that there's a theologist out there, his name is Gerard Laughlin. He's a famous theology expert. He did compare the movie to Plato's allegory of a cave, but do I see the similarities in that? Yeah, I've read Allegory of the Cave before. And, the similarity I do see in that is that, there's people being in a city not realizing that they're prisoners. And so I do see that similarity, but the fact that we have to go all the way back to Greek mythology, that's like, okay, really? So like I said, this movie is a standalone. It clearly defines itself, it defines the genre, and it stands on its own. So let's talk about what Dark City is. So Dark City is basically the people in the city are not aware that there's no daylight, because every day at midnight, they're all put to sleep and they're injected with these various memories, personalities, and other people's lives. So as people are sleeping, the buildings in the city are being transformed in an effort for these pale beings called the Strangers to study humans and find out what makes humans individuals. And so the Strangers, they want to know, where is the human mind? where's the human soul? And so the strangers are taking people's identities and memories from them as they are sleeping. So it's important to understand, who are the strangers? They are an extraterrestrial race that need humans to survive. Their race is dying, and they figure that dead humans make good vessels for them. So when you look at this movie, you'll notice their very pale appearance. That'll show you that this is a dying race. And so the strangers are keeping humans in the dark city to experiment on them. And so the way the movie opens up, we have this main character named John Murdoch. And so he wakes up in a bathtub naked, and clearly he's suffering from amnesia because he doesn't know what the heck is going on. And he gets a phone call from this guy named Dr. Schreiber, who tells him to leave the hotel immediately because people are after him. And so Murdoch, he's looking around and he sees this corpse of a woman in the bathroom, and he also sees a bloody knife, and he's like, whoa, okay, I gotta get up out of here. Let me listen to this guy I was just talking to on the phone. So as he's fleeing the scene, the group of strangers are coming out of the elevator. And so I'm gonna transition to another character, Officer Frank Bumstead, who's searching for Murdoch because he thinks that Murdoch is connected to a series of murders throughout the city. So the woman at the beginning of the movie, she's not the only one that was murdered. There are other women who have been murdered in the city. And so Frank Bumstead basically thinks it has to be this Murdoch guy. And so Murdoch eventually finds out that he has a wife, and his wife is Jennifer Connelly. And so the strangers, they're looking for Murdoch, and they finally get to a point in the movie where they run into him for the first time. And Murdoch realizes that he has these powers that are very similar to them, and the power is called tuning. And so he's able to use his tuning ability to escape the first time he runs into them. And so Murdoch is trying to get to Shell Beach because he ends up finding a clue that leads him there. And the crazy thing about it is he's asking people throughout the city, how do I get to Shell Beach? And nobody can successfully tell him how to get there. They all remember Shell Beach, but every time they're about to say where it is, they're like, oh, you know what? I don't remember where it's at. So as we can see, nobody in the city knows what the heck is going on. So eventually we get to a point where Detective Bumstead and Murdoch, they have a conversation about the city being very strange. And it's then that the officer is like, you know what? Murdoch actually might be an innocent guy because I don't know where Shell Beach is either. Like, I've heard of Shell Beach, but I definitely don't know how to get there. And so they both end up talking to Dr. Schreiber, who explains that the strangers are these extraterrestrial beings that use dead bodies as their hosts. And so the strangers are experimenting with humans to analyze how humans act. You know, how can humans help our race survive? And so he also tells them that, look, Murdoch, you're an anomaly. You woke up when I was trying to imprint you as a murderer. So we find out that Dr. Schreiber was working with the strangers, imprinting people with different memories and giving people different identities. You know, they've all just been trying to figure out, how does the human mind work? And so we get to a point where, you know, they drive to Shell Beach because they find out where it's located. And they come to realize that Shell Beach is not actually a real beach. It's just a poster on a brick wall. And so they're going crazy. They're like, this can't be real. So they end up tearing down the brick wall, ripping the poster, and it leads to outer space. So we're like, man, what's really going on here? What is Dark City? And so the strangers end up showing up, and they try to imprint him, and they end up capturing Murdoch, and they bring him in. They bring him to, you know, their facility. Dr. Schreiber, he's with the strangers, and he gives him something to imprint him, but he imprints him with something a little bit different. He gives Murdoch memories of his past, his childhood, and Dr. Schreiber's talking to him, you know, in his dreams of the imprinting. And so this gives Murdoch the power to wake up and realize, dun 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 dun, that he's the one. And so he wakes up and he kicks butt, and he's defeating the strangers, and he's using his tuning ability, and he kicks everybody's butt. And so Murdoch, at the end of the movie, he creates his own Shell Beach using his tuning power. And so he creates Shell Beach. He creates a new memory with his wife, Jennifer Connelly, and they live happily ever after. So that's basically Dark City. Long story short, to understand humanity, you have to search deeper than the mind. So the strangers, they should have been looking more to the soul of humanity. You can't just look at the mind, you gotta go for the soul. So different themes of this movie, different themes like memory, thought control, free will, alternate universe. I definitely think that this movie has helped shape, Christopher Nolan, how he approaches things as a filmmaker. And Christopher Nolan has said it himself. He's like, Dark City and The Matrix are two films that definitely influenced me as a filmmaker. These are films that made me think. They're very cerebral, and they definitely made me perfect my craft as a filmmaker. So Christopher Nolan definitely gives nods at this movie. Now, Roger Ebert, one of the most famous critics of all time, has a full commentary of the movie. Like if you buy this movie on Blu-ray, if you go to the special features, he actually commentates the entire movie. He praised the movie. He said it was his favorite movie of 1998. And so that says a lot for this movie. Like, as far as critics go, critics love this movie. It's just for some reason this movie just got outshined. It just came out at a time that I guess it just wasn't good for them. Because like I said, when The Matrix came out in 99, it just didn't matter. Like if you were sci-fi at that point, it doesn't matter. It was all about The Matrix. And speaking of The Matrix, let me go ahead and talk about the similarities of these two movies. They both revolve around love, identity, and reality. Also, let's look at our main antagonists in both movies. When we're looking at Murdoch and we're looking at Neo, both of them are living in a world which isn't initially what it seems to be, and it's ran by these mysterious guys that are dressed in black. Look at it, the strangers, the agents, looks pretty convincing, looks very similar. So John Murdoch, he's also similar to Neo in the fact that he's basically waking up to realizing he's in a world that isn't real. The strangers are walking around and people don't even recognize them. As well as in The Matrix, it's being populated by these androids, agents, and programs that they're not aware of because they're living in a virtual world. Let's look a little bit further. The strangers, they refer to themselves as Mr. Sleep, Mr. Brook, Mr. Wall, and the agents, they refer to themselves as Agent Smith. So both stories, they're known on a last name basis. Let's look a little bit further. The tuning ability. Whenever Murdoch uses his tuning ability at the end of the movie, this looks very similar to what Neo was doing to the agents in Matrix Revolutions. Now, I could be reaching a little bit there, but hey, do a side by side on both films or look at both of them and let me know yourself. They look pretty similar to me. So in Dark City, the strangers, they need humans to survive. And in The Matrix, the Sentinels, the androids, they need humans to survive as well. So remember, the Sentinels, they need an energy source, and human life energy is what they figured works perfect for them. So that's another similarity. It's also important to note that both films were filmed in Australia. So people come to find out that a lot of the same sets and props that were used for Dark City were used for The Matrix. The chase scene in the beginning of Matrix with Trinity in the beginning, that's the same scene that was used in Dark City. Like it's the exact same set. Hey, look at it for yourself. I'm not making it up. So both films, like I've come to realize, like a lot of the same sets and props, a lot of people like from the special effects team and the design team from Dark City, a lot of those people worked on The Matrix. And so that's probably the biggest similarity and probably biggest like influence. I'm like, dang, they use the same sets. It was filmed in the same place. Like that's crazy. And like also like there's things you could look at like the spiral staircase and some of the architecture, and like both films being very dimly lit. You'll be able to see that in both films. And so one thing I think that I like about Dark City a little bit more than I do for The Matrix is I like the fact that, you know, it's really cool that Murdoch can use his tuning ability. So Murdoch, like I said, at the end of the movie, he can create buildings, he can create the sun, he can create the sky, the beach. He can use his tuning powers for that. Neo never had powers to that extent. So, you know, even when you look at like the sequels, like it gets to a point where Neo is turning into Superman and he's flying. I'm like, okay, that's cool, but like he can't tune, no. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, he can't tune, like he can't create the sun, he can't create a beach. Like I just thought that like they kind of have the slight edge over Matrix for that. Like I thought that was pretty cool. But you know, if you watch Dark City, definitely watch the director's cut, because in the theatrical cut, it's kind of weird because Dr. Schreiber is narrating the first minute or two in the beginning and he gives away a lot of the plot points for the movie, if you ask me. Like, I thought that was kind of weird because I feel like Dark City suffers from what I call the Blade Runner syndrome. Like for Blade Runner, remember I told you, you got to watch the final cut. Well, for this one, you gotta watch the director's cut. I don't even know if they even sell the theatrical cut. They shouldn't. Yeah, definitely watch the director's cut. Don't watch the theatrical cut because the first 2 minutes, Dr. Schreiber's gonna explain everything and it's just it's gonna give away everything. I wouldn't do it. But hey, y'all let me know what you think. Like, I think Dark City is a very good film. I wish I could tell you where it's streaming, but I think you can rent it on Amazon. You can rent it on, I think YouTube TV, I believe. But y'all let me know what you think. If you're able to watch this movie, check it out. I definitely want you to leave a comment. Let me know if you like it. Let me know if you like this video. Let me know if you want to see some more monologues. But hey, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Y'all have a good one. Peace.